Let's start with the cranial meninges. First, here we have the dura mater, we have the periosteal layer, and the meningeal layer. The meningeal layer will reflect away from the periosteal layer in certain areas as seen here to create the dural enfoldings, which are home to some of the dural venous sinuses as seen here, but we'll get to that. Below that we have a thin intermediate layer, which is the arachnoid mater as seen here. And then we have the arachnoid granulation, which is an extension of the arachnoid mater through the dura mater into some of the venous sinuses to allow for the cerebrospinal fluid to flow through it. And then below the arachnoid mater, we have the subarachnoid space here where that cerebrospinal fluid is located. And then lastly, we have the pia mater here, which is the delicate internal vascular layer. Let's take a look at the dural enfolds I mentioned. First, we have the falx cerebri here that divides the brain into the left and right hemispheres. Next, we have the tentorium cerebelli, which divides the occipital lobes of the cerebrum from the cerebellar. Next, we have the falx cerebelli, which partially divides the hemispheres of the cerebellum. And lastly, we have the diaphragma celli, which serves here to cover as a partial roof to the hypophyseal fossa, which holds the pituitary gland. The dural venous sinuses are largely formed along the dural enfoldings I just discussed. First, we have the superior sagittal sinus, which can be found in the superior border of the falx cerebri, which drains into the confluence of sinuses. Next, we have the inferior sagittal sinus, which is found in the inferior border of the falx cerebri, which joins with the great cerebral vein to form the straight sinus found here. And inferiorly, we have the occipital sinus, which also joins in with the confluence of sinuses. From there, blood can flow into the transverse sinus, which is later met with the superior petrosal sinus, which is responsible for draining part of the cavernous sinus seen here. And then after this, it is the sigmoid sinus, which is joined with the inferior petrosal sinus, which is responsible for draining the other portion of the cavernous sinus. From there, these form the internal jugular vein, which exit out of the jugular foramen. In a closer look at the cavernous sinus, we can see that there are four cranial nerves that pass through it: the oculomotor, the trochlear, the abducens, and then two branches of the trigeminal nerve pass through, which are the ophthalmic and the maxillary.